there's no such thing as it being too late. Being a queer person is the same as being a brown-eyed person or a person born with a musical ear. Like, it's just part of who they are.
There was a girl and girl kissing on Brookside. It was just this crazy thing that happened. Okay, so my guest grew up in a world where queerness wasn't named, seen, or spoken about. There were no real role models, no language, no roadmap, just a feeling that something didn't quite fit and, well, a whole lot of silence. She's here to talk about that slow, confusing, deeply private journey, the friendships that brought clarity, the fear of disappointing the people she loves, the joy of finally stepping into herself, and what it means to reclaim years you can't get back. This isn't a story about being late. It's a story of finally stepping into the life that was waiting for you all along. Sarah, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for doing this. When you look back now, when did you first realise that you weren't straight?
I think it was a bit of a slow drip of realisation in my earlier years.
So there wasn't like seen Baywatch on telly and go, that's it. I'm not straight. It wasn't a moment.
I remember watching The Lord of the Rings and everyone being like, oh yeah, I love Aragorn or I love whoever. And I'm like, I could do a bit of Legolas, but only when he has the long hair. You know what I mean? Like Orlando Bloom outside of the character wasn't, doing anything for me.
Okay.
But it would have been when I was a bit younger, those early teenage years where everyone's figuring things out. And I always felt like I was maybe operating a step behind other people, that I wasn't getting as much out of these explorations that other people were having. And I often wondered why that was. Was there something wrong with me? Was I don't know, defective in some way? And then when I got a bit older, when I moved into my later teens, when I went to college and I had access to the correct knowledge and the words to express my feelings, that's when there was more of a big realization.
Okay. So when you were younger, let's just talk about the preteens and, you're trying to figure stuff out. It must have felt, like you said, you felt that you were quite defective or there's something going on because you weren't having the same reaction as a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What kind of situations are we talking about, like kissing boys and all those kind of experiences, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So, when you're young and, some guy decides they like you, some cute boy in your school, and you're like, yeah, I could be into that because I have the capacity to like people of all gender identities. So I was, happy to engage in those types of relationships. But I also felt like I was always holding something back a little bit, but I never had the words to say what that was. And I think my worldview was really defined by compulsory heterosexuality, which is basically the societal expectation that the default setting is straightness. And that can put pressure on people to only
be
seek
straight.
that path. Yeah, exactly. And that's just not the case for some people, including myself. So there was always this bit of access to my full scope of ability to, engage romantically with people. And I just wasn't able to tap into that because I literally had barely any idea that existed. At the time, there wasn't as many, we'll say, queer celebrities that had platforms. Mm-hmm. There wasn't representation of that in my world. I grew up in a small town. I just didn't see that. So when I grew up in Galway, I love Galway so much. Like going home to Galway is one of my favourite things ever. And I wouldn't say that Galway is just,
in a state of repression.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. But I just didn't have that accessibility or the knowledge to know this about myself.
Of course not, because you're a young teen in the late 90s?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm giving my age away there. Okay, early 2000s. I mean, I get that. And it's interesting that you're talking about that because I would have never thought about that before until... this is not a plug for Dancing with the Stars, but last year was the first time on a mainstream show on RTE that we had two males dance together, and it was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
And it was like, it's 2024 or whatever, you know, and, you know, you definitely didn't have that back in the early 2000s.
Absolutely not. Or any, I think any
Role models?
Yeah, or any of the, I guess, female on female or sapphic relationships that were portrayed in the media. Keep hitting this, sorry. But yeah, any sapphic relationships portrayed in the media, I felt were often performative for the male gaze.
Okay.
And that made me feel like it was maybe a hypersexual thing to do, to engage with other women. Or if I ever did it, it would be, you know, at some house party with a few drinks and there'd be like guys cheering. And that always grossed me out so much. And I really resented that element of it. But I didn't realize that I could explore that beyond this aspect of it almost being for men or something.
Do you remember Brookside?
No.
Okay, now I'm showing my age again. There was a girl and girl kissing on Brookside, and it literally nearly, like, media, it was just this crazy thing that happened, like one of the first things. And I never forget it because we were never subjected, or we were never, you know, we never saw this type of romance in the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
And you forget how important that is to people trying to work out their sexuality at a young age.
Yeah, just having that representation, seeing it as something that's normal is so important, because if you grow up without that, then you are sort of stuck with this internal struggle the whole time, wondering why you feel the way that you do and not having any access to a presentation of it being okay and normal.
Would you say it was something that consumed your teenage years?
I always felt I was sort of operating in this grey area. Like everyone else had their experiences and they were sort of up on this level above me, and I just couldn't access the same amount of joy or excitement maybe that they were. I wouldn't say it completely consumed me. I think, you know, when you're a teenager, all you want to do is fit in. So you put your time into, you know, enjoying the things that other people enjoy, maybe if they're not necessarily true to you. And it's so fine to do that, to just get through that time in your life. But I think it always was this sort of gnawing feeling in the back of my head. And I just always wish, and I'm so glad now that there is better representation, that queer relationships are represented in an age-appropriate way, we'll say in education, like through SPHE, whereas I didn't have any of that. So it wasn't, you know, appropriate adults that I could ask questions about. You know, if I saw something like on TV that represented queer relationships, I could have asked my parents. But instead, I was just going to these corners of the internet to access that information, and that's not necessarily always safe. There's amazing, you know, support communities on there, but in the sort of early 2000s it wasn't so much that way, and I would have just way preferred to be able to be outright and, you know, have inclusive conversations about that.
Like Belong To is a very good resource for young people out there. Okay, so the preteens was kind of tricky. You're not quite sure. Can we talk about when you went to college and things probably opened up a little bit more?
100%. So
Okay.
when I moved up to Dublin to go to college, I just had this whole new world unlocked for me. I met multiple different friends in university who were queer or had grown up around the LGBT community and just seemed to have had more exposure and access to it. And all of these things were so normal to them. I literally felt like when you walk into, you know, that scene in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where they like walk into the amazing room and it's like, oh my God, all these great things that I didn't know was just okay and was just normal for so many people. So the friends that I made in college would have been probably the first people who would have got to know that side of me as I got to know it myself. And having their support was, I think it has changed my life completely, the pathway that my life went. And I have amazing friends from when I was younger. I have friends that I've had for 20 years. And it just, until I was able to move away and feel that I had this clean slate, I couldn't explore this side of myself. And it's been amazing now to be able to live as myself, honestly, being exactly who I am and having the support of the friends I made at that time, but also the friends that I've always had and remain close to this day. It's been just a really affirming situation.
And to be clear, have the life that was waiting for you and that you were destined to have, but was maybe put on hold because you're in Galway.
No Galway slander. I will not hear
No,
it.
I won't. I'll take that back completely. Okay, so you had to. So just tell me about your family life, because did they not talk about? Was it just there was nobody in the family that was queer? There was nothing. It was never a conversation that was had in your household.
No, there was to my knowledge at that time, I
Okay.
didn't have any LGBTQ plus family members, and it just wasn't something that was brought up, at the dinner table. And also, I was wouldn't have really shared too much about my sexual or romantic experiences as a teenager
No
with
one
my family.
did.
I mean, yeah, you don't
No.
really go home on, a Sunday morning after your night out and been like, these are all the people I shifted at the club last night or whatever. Like, you just don't. So it just wasn't something that was brought up. And I was, living my own life up in Dublin, away from my family, who I love so much. Like I always say, the biggest gift I'll ever receive in my life is that my parents gave me 3 siblings. I'm obsessed with them. There's a big age gap with us, so I think there's that.
Where do they fall then, or where do you fall?
So I'm the oldest sister, and then I have a brother and a sister who are in their early 20s, and I have another younger teenage sibling. So I'm a good bit older than them, and I just love them to bits. They're great people.
Can you remember the time you came out, the age you were, who it was to? Do you remember saying those words?
So it would have been to friends, in my early 20s, like my first year of college, probably when I was about 19, and it would have been totally unceremonious. There would have been, it would be out in, a bar, a few drinks taken. I'd be like, I kind of want to get with someone tonight. Might be a girl. And they'd be like, Grant. Sure, they didn't care at all. So it wouldn't have been a big thing. But speaking with it with my family was definitely an obstacle that I felt like I had to overcome in my life. And it wasn't necessarily, of course, there's always fear when you're presenting a new piece of information to the people that know you the best and love you the most. But life just happened and kept happening, and I no longer wanted to obscure that from them. I wanted them to know me in my entirety and to celebrate these positive things in my life that I was not letting them in on previously. So speaking to them about it, it wasn't like a big, I don't know, I didn't
sit down.
Yeah, I didn't like lie in wait for them to come home under a rainbow balloon arch or anything and be like,
That would have been amazing though.
It would have been great crack. I should do that. I should do that at some stage. And they'll be like, yeah, we know, like, relax. And I'm like, just making sure.
Do you find, like, is that, like, the reaction? Let's talk about the reaction. So you told them, like, in passing?
Sort of. So I think for a long time, my family maybe thought that I wasn't super focused on romantic relationships because I never really talked about them. I think they thought I was, up in Dublin doing my bits and bobs, getting my career in order, whatever, and that maybe it wasn't a priority for me. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I was younger, I felt that way because I didn't actually know that I liked romance because I wasn't experiencing it in the full capacity that I could. But yeah, I just had relationships over the years. Maybe they wouldn't have been super long term with people of all gender identities, and I just wouldn't have brought that to my family. I also sort of felt like this weird thing where I was like, I need to be really sure. I like really held, telling my family at this up at this different standard to discussing it with other people.
Gotcha.
I almost felt I had something.
You can't take it back.
Exactly, and I felt I had something to prove nearly. I need to like gather this wealth of experience to like prove how gay I am to my mother, like whatever. Obviously that is not the case at all. Like, and all that happened was essentially I got into a relationship with another woman and I really cared deeply about this relationship and I was happy in this relationship and I wanted to share that aspect of my life with my family.
Of course.
I wanted them to share in that joy with me. And of course when you meet someone that you love and you want to bring them into the fold of your family as well. Like that's a huge part of it, meet the parents, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I just said it in passing one day, I am seeing someone new. I'm very happy. And they just so happen to be a girl. And, of course, when you present this new piece of information to people that feel that they know everything about you, they're going to be like, oh my God, what? But honestly, my siblings did not care. All they cared about was if I was happy. And I was like, I actually am. So delighted. And of course, there's, sort of some clumsy questions. And there's always this feeling of, is it going to change the way that they see me? Have I disappointed them in some way? But ultimately, the people that love you the most, they want you to just be happy. And I know that I've been really lucky in my experience. I don't want to downplay the privilege that I've had in having an accepting family, because that actually isn't the case for everyone. And I'm so deeply saddened and upset for people that have that experience.
Have you spoken to people, or do you know people who've had experience like that? You talk about like a privilege, which is it's quite an upsetting thing to hear as well, isn't it? That, you know, that it shouldn't be a privilege. It's a completely normal thing. But do you know of people who haven't had an easy experience like you telling the parents?
I do.
Okay.
I do know of people who have had to have periods of, we'll say, low contact or no contact with family members or even friends that they cared about very much. And I did let go as well of some friends that over the years found me getting with girls to be weird, or like, oh, you're taking this too far. Like, this is no longer just a fun, silly little thing we do when we drunk and we kiss each other or whatever. People that found that weird, I was like, okay, I'm identifying in you like a layer of homophobia that you probably don't even know that you have. It's just ingrained in you in the same way that I have internalized homophobia. And yeah, it's hard. It was hard for me to even let go of those friendships. So I can't imagine. I can't imagine, because I've been told it by, you know, friends or people I've met, but to experience that is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I do feel sad that we still live in an Ireland where people can be granulated down to this one little thing about them and be a sort of target of hate for that.
Let's talk about your younger sister, because she's coming up through a very different Ireland as well. Can we talk about the positive? I know there is that, but there is a lot of positives as well that have happened over the years. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go. But I suppose in a sense of visibility and role models and conversations and resources are there. Does that give you hope for the future?
100%. I was so delighted when I was, you know, gone off to college or whatever, and my younger siblings were in school, to hear back for their feedback from them that they were learning about queer relationships, or that LGBTQIA plus community was mentioned in SPHE or whatever, or that there was more representation of it in the, you know, shows they're watching on Netflix, or in, you know, the books they're reading, or the influencers that they follow on TikTok or whatever. And to know that that is being normalized, the visibility of queer people is more normal in society today, just made me feel so hopeful on one hand, and sort of sad for younger me as well, to not have been able to experience the joy in certain milestones that a new
the younger generation
is.
Exactly. So. And that just reminds me of John Boyne's book, Hearts of Invisible Fury, and the inspiration for that, you know, coming out and coming of age story. It was instigated by him watching an RT News report, and there was a gay man in his late 70s. It was the marriage referendum, and he was so sad. He said, because I won't experience, I'm so excited for the young people, but I'm sad for my younger self who had to go through all of this. And I think as years go by, it's getting better and better and better. There's still a long way to go, as you talked about. How important... Okay, so let's take away all the resources and just bring it back to the family unit, okay? Because, you know, it sounds like you have an amazing family unit. How can we improve that? I'm thinking about me as a parent. How important is language and talking about the queer community? How important is that to make kids feel that it's normal and they shouldn't have to shy away those feelings or those questions?
I think it's really important to foster that sense of openness with your child about any topic, really. If they feel they can come to you and ask a question like, oh, I saw two boys holding hands in town. Like, what does that mean? And if you're equipped with an age-appropriate response, or you have resources that you can go to as a parent to understand how to speak about that, I think that's essential. And I do think that that's out there now. So that also makes me feel really happy for, you know, younger people coming up. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's estimated that 6 to 10% of people are LGBTQ. So I do think parents should have, you know, a little bit of knowledge in their parenting. I don't know what would you say?
Catalogue,
yes, in their parenting catalogue, to be equipped to speak with them about that in a way that just helps to further normalize the existence of gay people in our lives.
It is a little bit easier for us now in 2025 because there are role models on the telly. It is more open, so they can see it. So we can have those conversations, but it is important to have those conversations, I suppose.
Yeah.
You've talked about consistently learning and unlearning. What are some of the biggest things that you've had to unlearn since coming out?
I think for me, there's been a learning and an unlearning. So, yeah, the learning for me has just been to sort of be okay with being misunderstood, that not everyone is going to get it. There are still people out there who, for whatever reason, think that gay people don't or shouldn't exist, or that they're in some way wrong, in some way an abomination, whether that's derived from personal beliefs, religious ones, whatever. And accepting that I can be misunderstood by people I'm okay with that now. And I actually think that coming out a bit later to my family, that time that went ahead of the period that I spoke to them about who I am stood to me in the end, because I had that extra bit of life experience to be able to express myself in a way that they would understand. And I also had a lot of fear that I needed to learn to step away from, because I have had negative experiences with men, times where I've been mistreated or my consent hasn't been respected. And I had a fear that the people who know me the most, who are aware of those things in my life, might think that me being queer is in some way some kind of response to my environment, or response to trauma, or response to something that happened, rather than being an inherent part of who I am.
Is that an argument you feel queer people have to have with the opposite side, so to speak? Like they think, like we're having these conversations about being open with your child, and you've consistently saying, having age appropriate responses and all that, but there is a cohort of people out there that do think that this is a response to trauma or to television or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Being a queer person is the same as being a brown-eyed person or a person born with a musical ear. Like, it's just part of who they are. If you don't accept that as someone who is meant to love them for who they are, if you will distill down their being to this one aspect of themselves and project prejudice towards that, that is your problem, not their problem. So, yeah.
That's it.
Thank you. I think as well with the kind of unlearning as well, it took me a long time to get to the point where I could say I'm okay with being who I am, and I don't have anything to prove necessarily to other people. I can just be myself, and sort of unlearning that internalized homophobia, which is where basically queer people onboard the sort of lies and negative stereotypes about gay people and internalize them, convert them into shame and self-hatred. I had to unlearn all of that, and it was such a long process. I used to project so much of my own internal issues onto other people. I would think like, the friends that I've had for years, if I come out to them now, are they going to think I was, I'm weird, that because we've, slept in the same bed together, or like changed in the same room together? Are they going to be uncomfortable now, knowing all those years have gone by that I didn't tell them this thing? But that was not the case at all. My friends love me for who I am, and I was putting that on them as an extension of my own issues about who I was. And I do feel that if I didn't have to suppress who I was for so long and take on these negative messages, I wouldn't have had to go through the difficulties of that. And even, jeopardizing, in my mind, friendships and relationships that I had, which were never in jeopardy. It was all because of these messages that I'd consumed over time. Even little things like when I was in school, people would be like, that's so gay, like they'd be like, as a derogatory description for something. And I do see that coming back now. I think people are much more comfortable again with using slurs of that nature. And I hate to see that because I know how it made me feel in terms of how I had to repress myself, because God forbid you be perceived as being gay, because that's been a term thrown around to describe something negative for so long.
Coming out later in life, what would your advice be to people who are questioning or are afraid to tell their family? What would you say to them?
I would say there's no such thing as it being too late. Everyone in this life is on their own timeline. Maybe you needed 20, 40, 60 years to get to the point where you know yourself well enough that you could express this. Maybe you needed all of the life experience that went before you to be able to understand this properly in a way that you can portray it to the people that love you. And I know I've said it before, but if you approach someone that is meant to love you, has loved you for decades maybe, and they would reject you on the basis of this, it's horribly difficult, because on the one hand, you have to sort of accept that you might let go of that relationship, or on the other hand, you have to understand and accept this element of homophobia that exists in them and try and move forward with that. And that can be devastating. And each person's experience with that is going to be totally unique to them. But so my only advice can be to do your best to know yourself, get to the point where you can feel comfortable expressing that to the people that care about you, and then seek community, because, the LGBTQIA plus community is one of the most welcoming communities I've ever experienced. And the Q stands for queer and questioning. If you're questioning your sexuality, you will be welcome. You don't need to define yourself. You actually never need to define yourself. People tend to sometimes use the umbrella term of queer a little bit more freely now. It's a word that's been reclaimed, something that was used as a derogatory term for so long. But you can use an umbrella term. I feel comfortable using that term for me, because it's something that is not ever changing, but ever being understood. It's something you are not constantly thinking about or anything, but as you gather more life experiences, that is part of you that comes along with all of those experiences. So it can change whether you're queer, you're questioning, or any of the other, letters that are represented there. You don't have to assign yourself to one thing. You can experience the community, find solace there, find support there, and go from there.
Tell me about life as your true self. How is it?
It's the most freeing. My life now is the most free that I've ever had it be, where I don't feel like I'm blocking myself off from opportunities. I'm able to live my life honestly and truthfully and as who I am, and getting to unlock all these different aspects of myself that I didn't even know I had. Like, I used to think I pure hated romance and that, Valentine's Day is a capitalist sham and whatever. I still can't think that, but now I'm like, I'm excited to go buy my girlfriend flowers, or if she leaves me like a cute little note, I'm like, oh, like so happy and giddy about it. And I never had those things before. I just felt like, there was something wrong with me. I just don't develop those feelings or something. And, being asexual or aromantic, those are really valid identities as well. And sometimes I wondered, was that who I was? But I'm not. I just wasn't, expressing myself properly. And to anyone who is maybe having these thoughts about themselves and wants to come out a bit later in life, there is no such thing as it being too late. Just one day of getting to live as your true and authentic self is worth all the time that went before.
Sarah, thank you so much. It's been an amazing chat. I commend your honesty and I really appreciate you being here. So thank you.
Thank you so much.